It's 3:30 in the morning on June 6th, 1944, and along the southern coast of England, thousands of Allied soldiers are sitting in silence, waiting, their landing craft rock against the dark water. Overhead, transport planes vanish into thick cloud, carrying paratroopers toward occupied France. Further along the coast, naval gun crews are already watching the horizon for the signal that will kick off the largest amphibious invasion the world has ever seen. Across the Channel, the Germans know an attack is coming they've known for years. What they don't know is where, and that's the strange part. Hundreds of kilometres from Normandy, entire German divisions are still on high alert near Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest crossing point on the Channel. Commanders there are studying maps and reinforcing bunkers, bracing for an invasion that will never come. Even as Allied troops are fighting for their lives on the Normandy beaches, Adolf Hitler still believes the real invasion is yet to happen. That wasn't an accident. It wasn't the fog of war, either. Months before a single landing craft touched French sand, Britain had built one of the most elaborate deception operations in military history using planted intelligence, staged illusions, and a network of double agents to conjure up an entire army that existed nowhere but on paper. That phantom army would help decide the outcome of D-Day, before the first shot was even fired. Setting the stage by early 1944, Germany still held most of Western Europe, even as the Wehrmacht reeled from catastrophic losses at Stalingrad and Kursk. Hitler's calculation was simple. If Germany could hold the Atlantic coast, an Allied return to the continent could still be stopped. For Britain, the coming invasion meant something bigger than another campaign. It was the payoff for 4 years of bombing raids, naval war, and rationing since the retreat at Dunkirk. But standing in the way was Hitler's Atlantic Wall, thousands of kilometres of bunkers, gun batteries, minefields, and flooded fields running from Norway down to Spain, built up under the supervision of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. Much of it was unfinished, but it was still enough to make any landing bloody. The real danger, though, wasn't the concrete. It was speed. Germany kept powerful Panzer divisions in reserve behind the coast, and if those tanks reached the beaches fast enough, they could crush an invasion before it ever got a foothold. So for the Allies, the entire operation came down to one resource that couldn't be manufactured: time. Every hour German reinforcements stayed away from the real battlefield was an hour that improved the Allies' odds of survival. British planners understood this months in advance, and it led them to a strategy that had nothing to do with tanks or firepower. If they could convince the German High Command the invasion was landing somewhere else, somewhere other than Normandy, they wouldn't need to overpower the Atlantic Wall at all. They'd just need Hitler to keep his best troops looking in the wrong direction. The obvious candidate was Pas-de-Calais, just 34 kilometres from the English coast, the shortest possible channel crossing, and the most direct route toward Germany itself. German commanders already assumed that's where the blow would fall. So the British made a decision that would define the whole plan. They wouldn't try to talk Germany out of that belief. They'd feed it. That was the beginning of Operation Fortitude, the western half of a much larger Allied deception effort, called Operation Bodyguard. Rather than hiding the truth, the plan was to build a lie so convincing that German intelligence would end up spreading it themselves. Building the illusion coordinating all of this fell to the London Controlling Section, working alongside the deception staff at Allied Supreme Headquarters. Their job was to weave every fake report, staged photograph, and planted rumour into one seamless, believable story one that could survive close German scrutiny, because a single slip could unravel the whole operation. Their method wasn't especially exotic. People believe what already fits their assumptions, and German commanders had spent years assuming Pas-de-Calais was the target. So, British planners simply made that assumption look undeniable. In the fields of southeastern England, dummy Sherman tanks made of rubber and canvas appeared almost overnight. Wooden landing craft lined stretches of coast. Empty airfields filled up with fake aircraft, arranged to look like active squadrons, and engineers even carved fresh tyre tracks into the mud to sell the idea of constant traffic. From the air, German reconnaissance planes saw exactly what they were meant to see. Radio traffic told the same story. British operators ran entire fictional military networks training reports, supply requests, routine orders, all following authentic procedure, all painting the picture of a massive force gathering for invasion. At the centre of it sat a unit that didn't exist anywhere but on paper, the 1st US Army Group, or FUSAG, supposedly a powerhouse of infantry, armour and support units positioned directly across from Pas-de-Calais. To sell it, the Allies put General George S. Patton in command. Patton had built a fierce reputation in North Africa and Sicily, and German intelligence rated him as the general most likely to lead the main invasion. His visibility, including staged appearances around southeastern England, reinforced everything the Germans already believed. But props and radio chatter could only go so far. What really made the deception work was a man risking his life to feed it directly into German hands. The man called Garbo his name was Juan Pujol Garca, a Spanish civilian with no military background who tried repeatedly to offer his services against Nazi Germany before British intelligence finally recruited him. They gave him the codename Garbo. His job wasn't to steal secrets, it was to invent them. Working under MI5, Garbo built an entire fictional spy ring inside Britain dockworkers. Clerks, railwaymen, all supposedly feeding him information. None of them were real. All of them were believed. Garbo's reports mixed real, low-value information with carefully placed fabrications, and by spring 1944, the Germans trusted him as one of their most reliable sources in Britain. So when he reported that the build-up in southeastern England was the true invasion force, German analysts had no reason to doubt him. It matched everything their own reconnaissance seemed to confirm. Each fake report reinforced the next, and each staged observation seemed to confirm the last. The deception was, by this point, feeding itself. The illusion meets reality meanwhile. That phantom army kept training. Convoys moved along country roads. Camps expanded, fuel dumps grew, and almost none of it was real. Inflatable tanks, dummy aircraft, empty tents. Even the discipline was staged, predictable vehicle routes, scheduled radio chatter, fresh tracks laid around fake camps. Nothing was left to chance, and putting Patton's name over the whole operation only made it more convincing. To German planners, Normandy increasingly looked like a diversion. The real blow, they were certain, was still coming at Calais. Then, in the early hours of June 6, 1944, Allied ships crossed the Channel, not toward Calais, but toward Normandy. Hitler's fatal hesitation as dawn broke, reports of paratroopers, naval bombardment, and thousands of approaching landing craft reached German command almost immediately. To officers on the ground, this looked exactly like the invasion they'd been expecting for years. But at Hitler's headquarters, doubt lingered. Months of intelligence, including Garbo's, had insisted the real invasion was still to come at Calais. Maybe, some argued, Normandy was just a feint meant to draw German reserves out of position. That doubt proved decisive. Hitler held back several powerful armoured divisions, unwilling to expose Calais to what he still believed was the main event. The German 15th Army, one of the strongest forces in northern France, stayed put instead of racing to Normandy. Field Marshals von Rundstedt and Rommel both argued for releasing the reserves immediately, but in Germany's command structure, the final call belonged to Hitler alone. And as the hours passed, and then days, he still couldn't shake the belief that a second, larger invasion was coming. Operation Fortitude hadn't stopped Germany from fighting. It had stopped Germany from fighting at full strength, at the one moment that mattered most, and that gap gave the Allies room to reinforce the beachhead, unload supplies, and dig in. Buying time by mid-June, over 150,000 Allied troops had landed, backed by nearly 7,000 ships and thousands of aircraft, the largest amphibious operation in history. But the fighting was brutal. At Omaha Beach especially, German strongpoints inflicted heavy casualties, and engineers worked under fire just to clear the obstacles. Every hour still mattered. Hold long enough, and the Allies could bring in tanks, fuel, and reinforcements. Let Germany counterattack fast enough, and the whole bridgehead could still collapse, This was exactly the moment Fortitude had been built for, and it kept working. Reports from Garbo and others continued convincing Hitler that Normandy might only be the opening move, so the 15th Army stayed at Calais, guarding a threat that didn't exist. Meanwhile, the Allies built the temporary Mulberry harbours off the Normandy coast and kept pouring in troops and supplies. By the second week of June, the separate beachheads had merged into one continuous front. The Allies weren't just surviving anymore, they were getting ready to break out. Rommel had warned all along that any invasion had to be crushed on the beaches before the Allies could dig in. He was right, and by the time Hitler finally accepted that Normandy, not Calais, was the real invasion, that window had already closed. What it brought them by late July, the Allies launched Operation Cobra, broke through German lines near St. El, and began racing across France. On August 25th, Paris was liberated less than 3 months after the first troops hit the beaches. Historians still debate exactly how many extra German divisions might have reached Normandy sooner without Fortitude, but there's broad agreement on the core point. The deception reinforced Hitler's fear that a bigger invasion was still coming, and that fear delayed the one thing that could have crushed the landings early, a full, immediate counterattack. Closure we tend to remember wars through their loudest moments, the roar of naval guns, the chaos of the beaches, the courage of men running into machine gun fire. But some of the most decisive victories are won long before any of that happens. Operation Fortitude never captured ground or destroyed a single division. What it did was shape a decision, Hitler's decision to wait. At the exact moment waiting cost him everything. And that decision was shaped by people whose names stayed secret for decades: radio operators, engineers, code breakers, and a Spanish civilian running a spy network that existed only in his own reports. Their weapon wasn't a rifle. It was credibility. And in June of 1944, that invisible weapon helped open the road to the liberation of Western Europe. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing to British Legacy for more deeply researched stories from Britain's military history. Thanks for watching, and until next time, lest we forget,